Is the deadline for those who want to run for the Fayette County Board of Education. One viewer wants to know more about a big responsibility that those boards have. George is asking, in Kentucky, who is responsible for hiring and firing public school superintendents? Well, here's our Victor Puente with the answer to that good question.
Kentucky law is simple when it comes to hiring superintendents. That is up to school boards. They appoint someone to the job. The term of office begins July 1st, and an appointment may go for a term of no more than 4 years. After that, the school board can choose to extend that contract. And if there's a vacancy, they can appoint an acting superintendent for up to 9 months. If that vacancy happens after a school board election, they have to wait until the new members take office. Now, when it comes to firing superintendents, that's a little more complicated. The law says a superintendent of schools may be removed for cause by a vote of 4/5 of the membership of a board of education, and the commissioner of education has to approve it. Now, there is another way they could be removed. That's if what is known as a highly skilled certified educator recommends it and the commissioner of education approves. You see that policy there. Now, that process, though, isn't certain. In March, the Nelson County Board of Education voted 4-1 to remove Superintendent Wes Bradley. Last month, the Kentucky Department of Education denied the Nelson County Board of Education's request, and it entered Nelson County schools into a management improvement program. Basically told them they had to work it out. If you have a good question, just email us. Goodquestion@WKYT.com. I'll see you on WKYT Mornings.